SINCA, sharing innovative and creative actions. That's for you. Hi, good evening. We're here at the Kotohira Tower building, and we are just about to start the session number 10, either one, of SINCA session. And this time we will call it the expert session. And since G20 Summit is coming up in Osaka in about 2 days, we decided to hold the session to talk about what's G20, what's going on in the world, and whether we get something good from that or not. So we have 2 guests, and I would like to interview, first of all, Tim Kelly of Reuters. Thank you very much for coming. We'll talk about the G20 Summit during the session with the participants, but let me ask you what kind of background you have, and you've been here and...
Well, I've been in Japan for 28 years.
Wow.
A long time. So I originally came in 1991, just as the bubble burst.
Oh, I see.
So my timing was very bad or very good, depending how you look at it. And then I originally came straight out of university, and I taught English for a couple of years.
I see.
Then I went back to the UK, went back to university, did a master's degree. Then I came back out to Japan. And after a few years, I became a journalist for Newswire British News, which no longer exists. And then I joined Bloomberg, and I was there for several years, covering the Prime Minister's office mostly.
Here?
Here, yes.
Oh, I see.
That was the time of Koizumi.
Oh, okay.
So
wow, that should be a very
interesting
time.
So I used to follow him around when he went to the G8s or G7s. So I covered a few of those around the world, in the US and in Europe. And then I was there, after I finished that, I joined Forbes magazine. I was the bureau chief in Tokyo for Forbes. And I did that for about 6 years. And that was, again, that's not covering politics, that's covering business, entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's all of it, you're searching for those entrepreneurs that kind of have new ideas that maybe at some point will change the world. And also you have to report about the Japan's richest people. So,
oh, I see. Right.
So you have to come up
yes.
with a list of who's the richest person.
I see.
And then after that, I joined Reuters. Initially, I was doing companies news. I was doing aerospace, airlines. I did some of the banking sector, securities companies. And then for the past 4 years, I've been covering national security, Japan's defense industry. There's been a lot of changes in defense recently. More recently, I've kind of broadened that out a bit, so I'm covering, I'm doing currently looking at a story at the Ainu. They're going to open up a new ethnic harmony space in Sapporo, which is, the timing is with the Olympics, so it's not a coincidence that that's happening. And then there's a new Ainu law that recognises the Ainu as an indigenous people for the first time. So this is the kind of things that are building up to the Olympics in 2020. So the world's attention is going to be very much on Japan in that period.
Right.
And as journalists, we're kind of very focused on that event and the things that are happening around it and the build up to that.
I see. Well, you've covered a lot of areas and very interesting people from different perspectives. Which one did you like best?
Which person did you like best?
Which person or which...
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. Yeah. I did enjoy covering Prime Minister Koizumi.
Why?
Well, he was a very interesting character.
Yes.
He was kind of somebody that, in a way, became Prime Minister by accident. He was never kind of meant to be Prime Minister in a way. He was never the choice of the LDP elite.
Right,
somebody who came to power through the rank and file members. So he wasn't your typical Japanese LDP Prime Minister, and he was just kind of an interesting character to follow. And he was also very, very, I should tell enough, he was also a very talented politician. His victory against the Democratic Party in his last election was
amazing,
flawless.
Yeah.
So Yeah, he was very interesting
I
character.
see. So how did you, well, but you covered the politics and politicians and policymakers, and then you covered the entrepreneurs. How was that shift, switch?
Well, I covered business before,
Right.
so I'd kind of covered business, also politics. So I've kind of switched between the two. Entrepreneurs, I mean, covering politics and covering diplomacy and covering entrepreneurs is quite different in many ways.
Right.
You know, and entrepreneurs in Japan is quite a difficult thing to cover because they're not very obvious. You know, Japan is not seen as a very entrepreneurial
Right.
country.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for them to find funding. Startups, you know, rather than becoming, you know, when people leave university, the ambition is not to create a startup and become
Right.
the next Bill Gates. It's to join a good company and work there for the remainder of their career. You know, and that mindset is still very strong. I think it's changed a
Yes.
little bit over the past few
Who
years.
were the entrepreneurs while you were covering?
Well, so I would cover, I mean, obviously people like Masayoshi Son. But also, you know, what I like to do is I like to find small companies
Right.
that people had never heard of, and people who had kind of interesting ideas. So there was a company that did freezing technology. So it was when you freeze organic material, it's damaged by ice crystals.
Right.
So you can't, for example, you can't freeze, say, organs before you transplant them,
I see.
which is why you have to rush them from the transplant, from the donor to the transplant patient very quickly through, you know, with an ambulance. But if you could potentially freeze organs, you could store them for extended periods of time and then transplant them into people.
I see.
It would be quite a revolutionary thing to do.
Right.
So there was a small Japanese company that developed technology where you could freeze things without damaging the organic material. A good example, if you can't freeze cream, I don't know if you're aware of this, if you try and freeze cream, it just becomes a mess of you know, the cream and the water separates from the cream and you can't do it. But for example, with this technology, you can actually freeze. You could freeze a cream cake.
I see.
And it would be perfectly frozen, and you defrost it, and it would be. So you know, it's transplants, but also you know, in the food industry, quite a revolutionary kind of idea. So I used to kind of look for kind of small companies that were doing things, or things that kind of told you a bigger picture about Japanese society. So the funeral business was an industry that I looked at. You know, as more people die,
Right.
you have kind of problems with, for example, what do you do with the bodies?
Right.
You know, the crematoriums. So, for example, in Tokyo, there are two big crematoriums. If you have more people dying, then there's kind of a queue.
I see.
Right.
Yes.
So people don't want to keep the bodies in their houses for a longer time. So there's a place in Yokohama. There's a hotel. It looks like a hotel,
It keeps.
but it's actually what it is for storing bodies, where you can go and visit the deceased people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's called Last Tell.
Oh, is that right?
Last Hotel, Last Tell.
I see.
So that kind of stuff I used to enjoy,
I see.
rather than looking at the very big companies.
Right. I see.
I like to look at the smaller, kind of more obscure companies.
Right. So, well, you have been a journalist
Yes.
all your life, essentially.
Well, for a long time.
Right.
Not all my life,
Yeah.
but a long time.
And what do you think is the role of journalists today? I mean, we hear so many news and all sorts of things, and I think they are, you know, they can be very, very influential.
I think the job of the journalist is of journalists has always been the same. It's never changed. You know, you need to be a reliable source of information. You have to be a trusted source of information.
Right. Yes.
Which in the world now is more and more important. I think people begin to realise that. So, for example, so I work for Reuters, and when somebody reads a Reuters story, you know, they can read it and know that it's not fake news, if you want to use that phrase. You know, there's a lot of misinformation in the world, and there's more and more of it. I don't know if you've seen recently this thing about deep fake videos, where you can use technology now that can essentially make a fake video,
Yes.
and you can't tell the difference.
Right.
You know, in a world like that, you need a trusted source of information and news. So that's what a journalist's job is to be. You know, and you have to be objective. Objectivity is a very important aspect of being a journalist. As a human being, you're not a machine, so it's very hard for somebody to be completely objective about a subject. You know, you have a view as a person about how the world should be or how this thing should be. But as a professional journalist, you follow a certain set of professional guidelines and ethics, you know, that make sure that what you put out is objective. That you present both sides of an argument. You give people the chance to voice their opinions, to voice. You know, you come up and say you have some information. I have to give you the chance to respond to that. You know, very basic kind of rules that are important to journalism. So there's a lot of people out there who say that they're journalists, but they don't follow those rules. So you know, I would, in my mind, they don't count as journalists.
But we have so many of those now.
We do, yes.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that forms the impression of the journalist, quote unquote.
Yes, so the public image of what a journalist is has gone down quite a lot.
Right.
And, you know, that's not the fault of what I would say a true journalist. You know, if you have a camera and you have a PC and now you have access to people through channels or sites, anyone can say, well, I'm a journalist. So people look at that and think, well, it's journalists, they're bad people. And obviously with a lot of misinformation in the world today, and with politicians also beating journalists, calling what they produce as fake news, then you know, the public image of journalism has taken a bit of a dive.
If somebody young comes up to you and say, would you recommend me to be a journalist, what would you say?
Well, I'd say if you want to make money, don't be a journalist.
I see.
You know, but I would say if you want to make a difference, then journalism is a good profession to have.
So it hasn't changed?
It hasn't changed.
I see.
No, I think, you know, the role of a journalist is more important now than it's ever been.
I see, yeah. I think so. It just is a matter of...
No, it's speaking truth to power.
Right, yeah. Well, I'll ask a little more about the Japanese media later on during the session. So thank you very much.
Thank you.